I just mentioned the revelation about Adam Schiff, but it also appears former FBI Director James Comey may have also had his own special conduit to the Times. Tell us about this.
Oh, yeah, look, all these guys were leaking. All these guys were scamming. All these guys were conspiring. Comey came off as, Dudley Do-Right, Mr. Straight Edge, FBI, American hero, and he was just a lying scumbag. It was disgraceful. He was using cutouts to send information over to the New York Times to try and undermine the result of the 2016 election. These guys didn't think the American people should have a right to choose their own president. They thought they were smarter. They thought they were better. They thought wrong. They're going to be held accountable, and I can't wait.
Well, let's talk more about this accountability here, because we're talking about mishandling classified information. Now, this is something that Donald Trump was at one point accused of doing, and people said, oh, well, this is absolutely terrible if he did this, and if, he had all those documents Mar-a-Lago or whatever, but this would seem even worse if they were releasing classified information to the press. What sort of trouble could they potentially be in here?
Well, look, there's a lot of things at play. Statute of limitations, problems of proof. But if they're within the statute of limitations of the time that they released classified material to non-cleared people, that's a big problem. Now, this was releasing classified material was a huge deal until Hillary Clinton did it. Yeah. And then it became, thanks to Jim Comey, not so much of a big deal. And then it wasn't a big deal as Adam Schiff was doing it. And it suddenly became a big deal when some of the stuff that Donald Trump took out of the White House turned out to be classified, which is exactly what happened with some of the stuff that Joe Biden took out of the White House. Now, of course, the excuse they used for not prosecuting Biden when they did prosecute Trump was that Biden was a senile human eggplant. And as a lawyer, I understand that. It's hard to convince a jury that he could form the intent to misuse classified information when he couldn't form the intent to tie his own shoes. But it just goes to say that right now in the United States, there's really a two-tier justice system where, laws are intermittently applied. They're applied only to your enemy, never to your friends. And I think James Comey, Brennan, Clapper, and some of these other folks may find out, particularly if the federal prosecutors are clever about how they charge and where they charge, because venue is hugely important. A case is
you're talking about Florida versus Washington here.
Government in D.C. that is in Florida. Yeah. They may find themselves on the wrong side of the bar.
Yeah. And I mean, what you talk about, this two-tier justice system, now, I've been talking about this on this program almost, I think, since it began a couple of years ago. This whole idea that the Democrats get to apply the law. You remember how, 34 counts about, business fraud and documents around Donald Trump, whereas when Hillary Clinton used campaign funds, the same thing he was accused of doing, to pay for the Steele dossier. I think she paid something like an $80,000 fine. Is the only way that this winds up ending this sort of cycle of, justice for my enemies and or no justice for my friends, does this only end when there is some real retribution and consequence for this behavior for the Democrats, for the left?
Well, I see some of these soft-hearted people saying, we should get beyond this. And I'm thinking, when did conservatism give up on retribution? Because I wasn't asked about that. Nobody asked me if we were going to give up on the standard method of human beings enforcing good behavior and decency over the last 100,000 years. When people do bad things, they need to be punished appropriately. Okay? They don't need to get a hand wave. They don't need to get a free pass. You have one set of standards for everybody, and you enforce it equally against everybody. And we have seen throughout the Western world, I know you have this problem in Australia, our garbage ruling class is doing it here. In England, I mean, it's just insane, where people are not equal before the law. Their characteristics, whether they be political or racial or ethnic or gender or bizarre gender, as the case may be, tend to matter more than what the actual law says. And I got to tell you, I'm tired of it. And I think the American people are tired of it. And I think men and women throughout the West are tired of it. And our ruling class better figure this out, and better figure it out quick, because it is unsustainable to live in an Orwellian construct of a justice system that is weaponized against the people in favor, basically, of rewarding friends and punishing enemies.
Yeah, well, Kurt, if you want to hear about Orwellian, I'll tell you sometime about what they're doing to the internet here in Australia. But first, though, speaking of Australia, there's another angle to this here, because Alexander Downer, now he's a former Australian diplomat, a former foreign minister, and he's been linked to that Russiagate scandal. He now says it is clear, he said, that factions within U.S. intelligence conspired against Donald Trump, in his words, quote, because they wanted to stop him getting elected. Now, he said this to News Corp papers here this week here. It's an extraordinary confirmation, because Downer, of course, was the guy who'd had that wine with George Papadopoulos that got that information into the Five Eyes network. What's your reaction to this admission coming from somebody as prominent as Alexander Downer?
Well, look, it won't be covered by the regime media here, because, of course, they all collected their Pulitzer Prize for this bogus story. Look, it's confirmation of what we already knew, and it is further confirmation that there are elements within our society, is at the top of our society, that doesn't actually believe in democracy. They believe in their own power. And it's a very dangerous thing. I just wrote a book called American Apocalypse, the Second American Civil War, about what could happen if this keeps up. Now, of course, America's a little differently situated than Australia. We kept our guns. You gave them up. Big mistake. But I got to say, I'm tired of my country and my civilization tossing away what made them the greatest and highest manifestation of humanity in all of history. I'm sick of it. And we're not going to tolerate it anymore. And we're seeing it around the globe as people stand up and say, no, we're not doing this anymore. The only question is whether it gets resolved peacefully or otherwise. But I got to tell you, it's going to get resolved.
Well, I think you're right about that. But before I let you go, Kurt, also other news about another name here. Adam Schiff and the Department of Justice has appointed pardon attorney Ed Martin to investigate his pardons here around mortgage fraud and other things. Kurt, tell us about this, because the pardons were very narrowly written. He could be in trouble for some other stuff here. You're a trial lawyer. Tell us about what else Adam Schiff could be on the hook for.
Well, look, Adam Schiff supposedly gave out classified intelligence information to the newspapers for political advantage. Right there, you have a problem. Now, the mortgage stuff; these are federal crimes, because the banking system is a federal system, and they are fairly common crimes. Somebody lies on their mortgage application to get a lower rate or other benefits, and regular people get prosecuted for it on a regular basis. So I don't understand why an attorney general in New York State, Letitia James, or a United States senator, my senator, in fact, who does the same, if they did it, shouldn't pay the same price as a regular person. Now, I don't know if they're guilty. I've seen some of the evidence. It seems worthy of investigating. And while I believe that you do to your enemies what they do to you, I don't believe you frame them. I believe there's one set of rules and everybody plays by them. The one set of rules is you get prosecuted if you do mortgage fraud. If they did mortgage fraud, and again, I don't want to frame anybody. If they're not guilty of it, we need to close the case and announce we didn't find evidence and move on. But if they did commit mortgage fraud, they need to be treated like John Smith walking down the street.
Absolutely right. Kurt Schlichter, thank you so much for your time.